Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest video. There is no epic loot here, only puns, taken from the website ReUpload. The link to the story will be down below. If you wish to support the author, please head over there and give them support. If you wish to support the channel, there are numerous ways to do so down below. There is Discord, merch, Patreon, bunch of other stuff too, so have a look in the description, you might be surprised. Anyways, now on to the fiction. As always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 153. Wayam knew pain like an old friend that had stabbed her at the back. She knew how pain could humble the grandest kings, motivate the most crippled beggar, and drive good people to do terrible things to make it stop. Wayam knew how pain could seep into memories, how a once precious, safe place or person could so easily be twisted into a nightmare. But suffering also served a purpose. Wayam liked that about pain. It was not a simple thing. It was a barbed rope that let someone pull themselves out of the darkest torpors of despair. To use deep internal damage to claw oneself out of hell itself. Wayam respected that. She still respected it as the red lightning crawled across her bark, blackening the once glossy wood and trying to find weak links in Wayam's body. The magic radiated power, but it also screamed with a peculiar kind of pain. The deeply buried kind of suffering that was soaked with rage and fear as it rushed out of the girl before Wayam like tears of a frustrated child. It was almost like Wayam looking back at herself when Delta first made her, filled with pain, unable to direct it. Her teammates threw themselves aside out of her range as Estelle's barriers failed to contain the storm, and her magic was quickly building out of the mage's control. The lightning spoke of anger and anguish, while the barriers she tried to use spoke of isolation and fear. What a troublesome girl. What an interesting pain. Wayam sent a vine to grab Estelle's arm, the lightning magic surging around the mage, burning the tendril badly. The once healthy green giving way to a destructive black, but Wayam pushed on through the damage. Estelle may have interesting pain, but Wayam was torture itself to challenges. Feeding pain into pain only made it stronger. The vine, as it crumbled to ash in places, curled around Estelle's arm as the meadow around them filled with the acrid smell of burning plant and skin. In a single instant, Wayam yanked Estelle off her feet and slammed her hard into Wayam's body, as sleek as mahogany table, as unyielding as a castle gate. The storm of magic arced up, trying to burn Wayam like she was some common oak or elm. "Go to hell!" Estelle screamed, not really seeing Wayam anymore, but some phantom that she locked deep inside her heart. "I have been. It's quite lovely this time of year." Wayam sniffed with a wince as one bolt got dangerously close to her eyes. She had no desire to be blind for the next hour. Just as she was about to smother Estelle in a cocoon of vines to put her out of the fight for now, Wayam blanched in surprise as Silver slammed into her back, holding the axe that she had disarmed the warrior of previously. The weapon buried itself into a wood with annoying ease. That was a dungeon-made axe. Wayam could feel it as it wriggled into her body with more power than it should have had. It was perfectly balanced axe, the exact perfect make of wood, metal, and grip. She arced her back, trying to pull it out as it shined in the light. That was when the enchantment inside seemed to turn on by some command phrase shouted by Hazar. The axe began to vibrate, the barely visible metal head glowing with a strange symbol of two interlocked spheres. With more power than before, Silver began to push the axe into a protective bark like she was made of butter, and that the axe had been kissed by the sun personally. She threw Estelle away in pain as she whipped her vines about. "I'm all for bearing the hatchet, but I have some self-control," she warned Silver, and began to badly winded from the sheer blows he was taking. The axe concerned Wayam badly. The enchantment inside was making a joke of her defenses, and yet there was something else about it, a sort of mischievous design to it all. She tossed Silver away, and the axe went inert, shining with runes that Wime knew in passing. The axe was made by someone either quite insane or quite bored. Maybe both. If she were reading what visible runes there were on the weapon, then it was called the unhelpful something. Axe was likely missing a word, but the runes described an enchantment that would turn the axe into a powerful weapon, as long as it was inside a target. As in, it was just a normal axe when it was swung, but gained immense power at the last second as it chipped away at her. If Silver hadn't used it then, it would be useless as Hazar wouldn't actually get past her bark and to get to the tool inside her. The crude man, these filthy people. Her inner rings were for Sir Fran's gaze only, if anyone's. Unable to yank the axe just now, she turned back to thrashing these people so that she could get them out of the dungeon to allow Wime to clean up somewhat. The barrier mage alone had set a beautiful meadow on fire. "Now, let's end," she began, looking down at Estelle, who was no longer shooting a chaotic storm of magic as she lost control. The little newt looked up at her with a smirk that made Wime want to headbutt her on principle. "Did you like my daddy issue act? The trick is to actually have the trauma," Estelle said casually as the previous uncontrolled magic arced into the air from her hands, curving with barely controlled effort. It was still a far cry from the wild casting she was doing from before. "More lightning. They didn't work the first time. It won't now," Wime warned coldly, and the lightning abruptly homed in on her as if attracted to something. Something like an axe that was digging into her more tender innards. "Ah, you little pieces of," was all she got before the world flashed white and the scent of burning wood filled the air. "This is it," Mila said as to Pick as they waited on Haldi, the third member of the Elders of Durance. They stared into the distance as something made its way over the slightly overgrown roads towards the village. Oddly, both villagers and the two royal knights stared at the approaching convoy with slight distaste. Mila looked back to see Madame Gu slamming her inn door shut with a snarl and down the street. Isanella was guided inside her house, hyperventilating by her husband and concerned son, Dio. The horseless carriage moved over to the ground, hovering over the rocks and weeds with a magical underdevice that was having serious trouble producing enough speed until it got nearer to the village. The carriage was a long box thing with a white frame that, despite traveling through the woods and countryside, was spotless. The thing had cleaning runes, hover runes, propulsion runes, and who knows what else on display. Mila openly curled her lip as it greedily drank in the precious dungeon mana in the air, churning it about until the mana lost its vibrant orange color, visible to those that could use their eyes to see such things, and was exhausted out of the back of the carriage in a tainted greyish manner that simply floated off without any texture to it. As it turned to stop outside the village proper, a symbol was displayed on the side as the back opened like a maw of a beast, allowing what looked to be some group of scouts, soldiers, and people in robes to exit. The symbol on the carriage and on the people leaving were two hands grasping each other's wrists over a glowing orb, tendrils of light flowing from the orb like a blessing that bound two hands together in unity. Mortal hands working together with the blessing of a dungeon. Fair play's symbol. Their motto was stamped underneath, and Mila couldn't stomach it anymore, looking away as she tried not to split in their direction. With mutual respect, we all play fair. And if there is no respect in suffering, they make it fair. Pick rolled his tongue as he glared at the people coming closer. "Greetings. We are Fairplay, and we're working under Director Ripdoy." A greeter came, looking like one of the more casual people exiting the strange carriage. He smiled like he was trying to sell them something. Before the man could wind up his speech, a young boy fell out of the carriage, letting out a cry as boxes of tents, supplies, and maps landed around him like a sad, fluttering rain of paper. The man's smile went tight. "Please excuse the lad. Gentle, this is his first expedition," he said smoothly with the slick back hair and barely grown beard. His white clothes bothered Mila immensely. He was starch white in his uniform with the occasional stripes of silver to give it some edge, but he was sterile to Mila. His manner had experienced much, but he was like a man, and all others from Fairplay had done something over time to scrub themselves of any defining manner signature. How would you like to discuss perhaps signing up for Fairplay's protection program of a team, madame? I assure you that the dungeon can be safely managed, and while you may enjoy the benefits of its lower levels, it can grow to be quite unwieldy to those not used to the nature of such things. The man went on, and Mila felt like each word spoke was coating her in slime. The boy from earlier moved closer, and Mila felt a flash of actual something about him. His manner was shiny and keen, as if trying to take everything in at once. The man looked down at him with barely concealed annoyance. Gentle, Director Riptoy would feel better if you perhaps stayed in the mobile transport, he suggested to the boy, and Gentle winced, swallowing hard. I'm a part of the Scout program, like anyone else, Senior Marla. My father, the director, should be expected to treat me like anyone else, he protested, and the man exhaled once, his nostrils flaring. I'm sure that simply traveling with us is far more than the director could have expected from you, Marla said with a saccharine tone, and Mila cleared her throat. I'll talk to him over tea, not you, she grunted, jutting her chin to Gentle, and the man stared at her, his practiced expressions fading him as his jaw dropped open. Madam, he began, and Mila leaned in and grabbed his tie with what was barely visible under his protective white jacket and yanked him close so that he could smell the burning whiskey on her breath. He wrinkled his nose, but Mila saw him look surprised when he failed to break a grasp. My name is not Madam, it is Mila Darknessbane, she whispered to his close face, and the man's face went so pale that it made his white uniform look like a cheerful in comparison. She's dead. No one heard from her. You, in years, he protested as Gentle's eyes went wide at the scene. Mila looked at him, and for a second, the monster inside her showed in her eyes. The killer that hunted the king of hell itself and bedded him when he proved actually unkillable. The woman who threatened the king of the land. The huntress whose eyes glowed like a wolf's. Mila's eyes flashed, luminous and amber, slitted with a single blip of her intent. The man did a neat trick and turned his uniform mostly from white and silver to white, silver, and a splash of dark grey from sudden dampness. He looked behind her to Pick, as if trying to convey how dangerous Mila was. Pick looked at him, smiling, and Marla dropped to the ground shaking. Mila knew that he was wearing his Deep Dweller dentures, a neat set of teeth that had a dozen needle-like teeth along with an oddity of turning his gums black. Pick said that they made peanuts taste like shrimp, but Mila was sure that he liked using them to whistle to the pitch-perfect control, with annoyingly perfect control. It distracted Mila during their card games, and she'd never be able to focus on winning, which is exactly why Pick did it. She blinked, shaking her head as she was getting lost in thought. Old age was a drag. Right, waste of air, and boy, waste of air, go away and talk to me ever again. Boy, come with me. Pick, get Haldy and the other boy he's got. Alpha, meet up with us at the pub. I'm going to need a drink, she instructed, and the other elder hummed. I'll bring Grim, he's more social these days. Pick whistled, and Mila's eye twitched at the noise. Nearby, a pair of big eyes stared at her, a big, hopeful smile on his face. Mila stared as Gentle followed behind, shell-shocked at the events rapidly flying out of his control. Fine, get your mother's permission and you can join us, Dio, she sighed. The boy ran off, excited to have more friends. She couldn't fault the boy. Durance didn't have more kids after a certain period. Dio had grown up with the same children his entire life, that, in the last few months, so many people had come to town that it was just feel like Dio's world was opening up like never before. At this point, she should bring Rudy just so that she had someone to share the pain of having so many children about. Plus, Rudy's tab at the pub was a lot smaller than Mila's. Estelle staggered slightly to her feet as the room was filled with smoke and ash, making her team cough as Estelle tried not to simply pass out from sheer exhaustion. Her body ached horribly, every muscle cramping, then releasing only to bunch back up again. The lightning had not spared Estelle entirely, and her father's warning of overusing the family magic rung in her ears. "Your mother couldn't handle the inferior version of it. You'd do well to do extra cautious, as you have both mine and hers in one, and mine is potent." He was so damn smug. Estelle also wished that she stopped reminding herself of the fact that her mother and father were second cousins. It was bad enough when the girls in her school had found out. Not as bad as finding a smoldering pile of ash that used to be her mother in the back of the garden one day. Not much ever topped that experience. "Stop it! Breathe! Wall it off! Close it off! Don't recall!" she whispered to herself, feeling barriers form all over her body. This magic didn't exhaust her. It felt cooling to her smoking skin. She jumped as Khan appeared, gently holding his hand out. Hey, we're here," he said, in a smoke and smog that obscured everything. Estelle could have swooned and fell to her knees in what would have been a main character energy. Her, the beautiful heroine who blew apart the very unpleasant tree. But she was too tired, so she just smiled as Hazar and Silver joined them too. Everyone looked like hell. Hazar had a massive bruise on his face that was already swelling. Khan was limping badly, and one of his thumbs was bent the wrong way. Silver, without his cloak, just looked like a badly beaten pulp of silver and skin, all blurred together by Wyam's sheer relentless blows. It made Estelle wonder how she looked, other than cooked and smug. "That was insane, but we won," Khan announced, and Estelle couldn't help but giggle in the sheer delight. Hazar clapped Silver on the back, also grinning. However, through the smoke and ash, a familiar voice made them all turn slowly, as one group, to stare at where Wyam should have been laying, defeated. "I have a lot of curse words that I could say right now," Wyam's voice said, smoothly, as if nothing was wrong, "but I'm a classy woman, so I'll settle for a simple—" The smoke cleared to show Wyam moving her branch arms away from her face, waves of green falling off of her, and more branches simply snapping off. Her torso had one lone, angry red crack in it, traveling from her base all the way up to her face. In her roots was Hazar's axe, the thing blackened, but not ruined. Wyam easily threw it up into the air and caught it over and over. "Ow!" she concluded, her face devoid of emotion. How are you alive?" Estelle stuttered when Wyam batted her one remaining eye innocently as the other burned red with the heat of the attack. "Spite, my sweet things, delicious, sweet spite. Like pain, you can use it to do some truly amazing things, if you have enough of it," she purred, her voice a little hoarse from the damage. "Do we have any options left?" Khan asked seriously, and they all shared a look. "I can throw myself at her remaining eye with my fingers, claw it out," Estelle said, standing up straight, despite everything inside her wanting just to lay down and— "Pathetic! Rip this mouthly tree's remaining hair out one by one. She should thank her father for her amazing motivation he granted Estelle through the years. Estelle would have to actually want to see the man first, but that was just semantics. "Tell me, Axeman," Wyam suddenly spoke, twirling the axe with a smirk that made the group become instantly wary. Hazar seemed to narrow his eyes with suspicion. "If I were to let you all pass, but in return you would have to leave this axe behind, would you do it? It's only gained surface damage. It'll serve you for many years to come." Wyam trailed off as the head of the axe glinted slightly in the light. Estelle felt hope rising in her chest, and Khan shot Hazar a curious look. Silver simply watched as the more human aspects sculpted themselves back into shape. Hazar seemed to consider it for a moment. "No, but it's not about the axe," he said, and Estelle's jaw dropped open. "We lost. It's not going to get easier, and I won't risk my tea because of my pride," Hazar said softly, and Estelle's anger drained away. Hazar was always so stupid and noble. He had the best traits of their family. "Very well. You all lose," Wyam announced simply, and the magic over the door snapped with the pop, unseating them. Estelle felt like it was the most damage Wyam had done to her in the entire fight so far. The gut-wrenching feeling that she failed, that she lost searing into her and branding iron. There was an awkward pause as Wyam handed Hazar his axe back, as if being prodded by some invisible angel on her shoulder. "Before you all go, I must relay to you all invited to attend the You've Cleared the Nearly 2 Floors party in your honor on the next floor. There is free food and a resting spot, Doubter is quite pleased with you all, but, Wyam's relaxed form looked suddenly dangerous once more. The door at the end of the hall is sealed. Attempts to open it will ensure you are all escorted out by the guards, she warned with a smile. We can go on, Khan blinked. As losers, yes, Wyam said sagely. Do you have to rub it in? Estelle scowled. Wyam eyed her with one lone eye. The salt and sand, she said, with sickening sweetness. Estelle hated her. So much. But she also respected Wyam a little. Estelle liked her confidence and lack of concern about others' feelings. It was admirable. If Wyam wasn't such a massive, smile and wave goodbye to the murder tree, Azar muttered, shoving her on before Estelle could say exactly what was on her mind to Wyam. Estelle used her hand to send a message, but she didn't wave. Wyam's delighted laugh was the last thing she heard as they climbed the sudden stone steps down into the darkness. All the while, Silver was muttering to himself. Onwards, but with no victory, right, wrong, invited, but not progressing, he said, and Estelle hoped this feast was something, or she was going to scream. This dungeon was simply the weirdest thing that she'd ever encountered. End of chapter. Chapter 154. Gentle Progress. The third floor had an almost completely different atmosphere than the second. Estelle had heard that dungeons could be like that, but the change between the first and the second was nothing compared to the current jump from the second to the third. The first floor almost felt like it had been trying to ease the group in from the outside world. Caves, dirt, webs, the usual affair. The second was more forward in informing them how they were in a different world within the dungeon, where life thrived, and it felt like they had traveled thousands of miles, not gone down some steps. The change between the second and third was as if they had entered a conquered castle. The air of war still fresh in the air despite the clean tapestries and rugs. The castle could have been claustrophobic and oppressive, but the illusion of sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows and the use of brighter colors had almost tricked them into thinking that they were walking through a very sleepy antechamber of some queen. Estelle would have liked to enjoy it more, but with her body developing a wide array of electrical burns after her misuse of her family magic and Wyam's tender touch, her body was already displaying a wide array of bruises in a mosaic fashion. And there was also another pain. I used to have a horrible skeletons here, ready to debone any intruders like fish, Maharia, the fairy, complained as she tutted about the entrance. And where are my paintings of screaming people being splayed open and operating tables? I paid a lot for them. She threw her hands up as she looked around the room. You act as if you own your place, Khan said brightly, and then the fairy turned very slowly to him, face devoid of emotion, as she spoke very softly. Not about a month ago, I would have had your own skeleton ripped out of your own skin and flesh to dance for my amusement. There was no acting involved, Maharia warned, but Khan just grinned at her, waiting for a punchline to some joke. Estelle wasn't sure that Maharia was joking. What's that? Azar asked, and Silver walked up to the massive rendering of the world in its flatness, showing the ever-expanding edges and across its surface. There was a few orange glows. Most of them were around where Durance was on the real map. If Estelle was right, the other two were in the capital next to a massive golden glow. However, as she looked closer, she noticed that there was a very long thin vein of salt stretching across the land to near the middle of the map, where there were a few places of note. The orange vein looked like someone had cut it off with a knife. There was a second, duller vein to the north. I suppose a little spoiler won't do against the rules. You could say that the third floor has two core elements to it from what I've seen. Learning and culture. I would have personally enjoyed Delta turning this floor into a massive level of buzzsaws, spikes, and rotating death traps. That would require pinpoint precision platforming. We would have called it the Track of Torture or the Orange Palace. But that's just me. Maharia rambled for a moment as they all stared at the malicious little creature with wariness. The, map? Azar prodded her slowly. Oh, right, the map is a real-time simulation of the world, and it shows the biggest dungeons in the world, along with anyone that's got Delta's mana in them. It's, symbolic. Maharia waved a hand. Look at how far you've come, but how much you've yet to see. She mimicked another voice, sounding more chirpy. Estelle looked down at the map again, and Hazar went very still as his eyes landed on a particular part of the map. The twin dungeon, the axe of yours came from there, Maharia said, voice amused as the light danced between blue and green in a single spot. Does it do anything else? Khan asked eagerly as Maharia eyed them before she snapped her finger, causing the massive grinding noise to emanate from the 4 pillars around the room. The orange barrier snapped into place, cutting the group off from accessing the map as the thing seemed to sink into the floor. Not for losers, she said smugly, and Estelle glared at the evil pixie. Which way are we going? Hazar said, sounding tired. Straight ahead. To the west is the place of deep foreboding knowledge, where a jackal resides in a shrine of filth, Maharia warned dangerously, before pointing the other way. That way has some of Este's relatives, she giggled and flew forward. Estelle looked down the long hallway, noticing how the hallway slowly grew grass and seemed to become wet. I know that's an insult, Estelle accused, as the group moved around the map and towards the doors ahead. Yeah, to the 2 that live down here, Maharia called back cheerfully. Through the smaller door, the group came to an abrupt stop as they entered a truly massive hall with many tables and a roaring fireplace. Bright stone and banners decorated the wall, making it seem like a wake-up call after a softer rooms previously. On the side of the room was a massive painting of sorts of a dark evil knight being commanded by a wicked-looking bone demon with blonde, curly hair and a wicked smile on the other side. A royal goblin rode a pig against a fell knight with a now familiar orange figure of Delta standing her light in the pig knight. On the other side of the hall was a massive range of food, arranged like a buffet, as a banner welcomed them to the Free Heal Hall. Who's that ugly demon brat? Khan asked, pointing to the figure behind the Dark Knight. Could be a goblin demon or a gremlin using dark magic, Hazar speculated. Whatever it is, it's clearly lost against the dungeon, so it's a loser, Estelle scoffed, as Silver wandered off to the table and began to run his hand over it in awe. Estelle noticed that there was a distinct lack of commentary from Maharia for some odd reason. Turning, she saw the pixie was trying to drown herself in a strange fountain that spewed chocolate into a basin. So, you're all here, came a voice. Estelle spun to a corner where the table had been set up to obscure some figure that was sitting down, enjoying a massive mug of some liquid and a cooked meal that she was now polishing off with dessert. Estelle's customary confidence withered at the sight of the nearly 7-foot woman standing up with her dark skin and hair that made her stand out against the white stone. Her clothes proclaimed that she was some sort of hunter, but the yellow glowing eyes said a different thing entirely. There was a massive sword on her back that looked to be bundled up for some reason, and when she began walking towards the group, her entire frame radiated pure physical power. Oh, are you one of the monsters on this floor? Khan asked excitedly. Rudy stopped in front of him, making him crane his neck to meet her eyes. Khan, Hazar tried to warn, but there was a flash of movement and Khan flew back across the hall and landed in a roll. I'm a monster, but not a dungeon one, Rudy said calmly, lowering her fist as Khan stared up at the ceiling, dazed and still smiling like a weirdo. My name is Rudy, and I'm here as a proxy of the Elders of Durance, the town that you were supposed to stop by first, before accessing Delta's dungeon, as required by a bunch of boring laws I can't name off the top of my head. I do know that if the Elders really aren't happy with you, you could all be looking at some serious public service sentencing. The giant woman grinned viciously. Estelle took a step back, face going pale. Public service punishment was one of the worst kinds that you could get. Stacking prisoners in jail cells had gone out of fashion a while ago. Now prisoners wore special collars that kept them in certain range of a public store or beverage house. They would serve the rudest, vilest customers that could be found, since they knew all the workers were prisoners. The collars meant every curse and angry statement came out as polite company jargon or platitudes. Estelle would rather be sentenced to mining or induced into fair play's garbage to work off her prison time. And if I know the Elders, trust me, I do more than I like, Rudy muttered before she cleared her throat. Then you'll be set to help Haldy sell his wares or weeding and Dabbergast. Warning, Dabbergast is in a foul mood, and the weeds will most likely throttle you, Rudy said unapologetically as she moved forward more. If one more tree or plant hit Estelle, she was going to go on a murder spree against anything brown or green. Wait, Azar said, holding his hands up. Yes, Rule Baker number 2? Rudy asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. How did you get here before us? We had to fight a murderous tree for keys and, everything. He trailed off, going quiet as he must have noticed how crazy that sounded to even the people who'd just experienced it. There's a shortcut from the first floor to the third floor that you can use if you beat YM or aren't a challenger. I've been inside Delta and explored her more deeply than you'll ever match, Rudy said with a smirk. She looked left as if seeing something they couldn't, like how Maharia and YM sometimes acted. It's technically the truth, the best kind of truth, Rudy said with what could likely be the dungeon, some sort of invisible avatar. That was insane. Dungeons didn't get avatars until they were far more advanced. We got invited to a feast, Silver said finally, breaking his silence. Rudy eyed him, and she seemed to soften just a tad. And you can enjoy food before we go. I don't feel like hog-tying you all together and carrying you out, she said before looking around. Hell of a place, right? She asked suddenly, as if she just hadn't been threatening them with public service punishment, and punched Khan, who still looked a bit dazed, if not in a bit in love. It's, weird. It makes no sense. And the dungeon is insane, Estelle announced. Arms crossed in defiance as Rudy turned to her, yellow eyes now dangerously close to glowing. Oh, she said simply, and that word carried a lot of unsaid things in it. Estelle waited 3 whole seconds before looking away. As someone who is weird, told she made no sense, and has been called insane by people who should have cared for her, I suppose that means that Delta is simply more exceptional than any other dungeon. Her second-floor boss is a massive, a piece of personality. Estelle managed to bite her tongue at the last second. That's some self-control with that last part, Rudy said, more relaxed now. She's just scared that she's got to walk past Wyam again, and the tree will know if we insult her. Khan muttered, and Estelle stomped on his foot with her now muddy heels. Don't worry, we'll be taking the express elevator, Rudy promised, and turned her head to look at the side door. Following her gaze, Estelle let out a shriek as the massive goblin stood nearby her in an apron and with a skull on her face. It was impossible, but it was a female goblin. Goblins didn't have... goblins, simply... Estelle's brain felt too tired as this goblin looked them over and seemed to find them all as impressive as some cave slime that she'd stepped on the journey down to the 3rd floor. Make 'em walk back. I don't want them in my kitchen, she grunted to Rudy, who snorted. Be nice, Miss Farah. They got their asses kicked by YM, she said, and the goblin sneered. So did a bunch of children, and they won, she said before clapping her hands. Assemble, she grunted, and behind 3 forms appeared as if emerging from her shadow. From the left, a wicked goblin in a robe with burned edges holding a staff walked out, cackling. From Farah's right, a topless goblin with scarily impressive physique, not nearly as nice as Rail in Estelle's opinion, walked out with his hands in wraps. He grinned brightly at them. Then, leaping over Farah's head with a dark bow drawn, was a dark goblin with red eyes and a series of custom arrows on his back. Oh hey, the Stooges! I thought they didn't do well on lower floors, Rudy said conversationally as Estelle backed up, bumping into Hazar. Around me, they don't die, Farah said simply. Still, hard to breathe down here. It's like inhaling sawdust off a pink's rump, the fire mage grunted. It's good training, the fighter mused. The last one didn't speak at all. They'll help you lead them out, Farah said simply and walked back to the door and into the kitchen. When she was gone, the 3 smaller goblins let out big sighs. Humans, I am your superior in every way. Swa. You may refer to me as Master, Lord, King, Senator, Duke, Emperor, Chief. The fire goblin listed off, running out of fingers before he borrowed the fighters to help him keep track. I'm numb. I like eating things and napping, he beamed. Estelle was having a nervous breakdown. Sociable goblins. What's next? Really, the archer said in a low, dark tone with almost pleasure at the unease. Well, let's dig in. Here's to your massive loss to Wyam. May you legally return to try again, Ruli held up the goblet of wine, and Khan heartily toasted with her. I need cake, Estelle decided, as Silver was having a blast, touching the goblins, and Hazar was simply standing there with a blank look on his face. Thus ended their delve into the dungeon known as Delta. Or, if you asked Estelle, the really weird one down south with the mushrooms and scary monsters.
So would it be for the best that the town adjourns maybe should agree to let Fairplay to run the dungeon in the place because
Gentle started in front of the three elders. Mila was having a blast. She forgot how awkward children were when they weren't related to herself, Pick, or of any one endurance. They were like newborn deers finding their legs. In her home, she, Haldy, and Pick all listened to the world's worst scheme pitch as they drank. Next to them, Dio was giving the boy a thumbs up in an effort to boost Gentle's confidence. Alpha stared blankly at him, as if Gentle was insisting that they set Delta on fire, and Grum was burying his face into the arms into which kept muttering, "Cringe."
Fairplay promises complete assurance that all parties involved will receive
Gentle trailed off in panic as he struggled to remember what likely was the boring dry number on his contract. Ballpark it, Mila hollered, cheeks pink from the whiskey. A lot more specific ballpark, lad. Pick spoke up, banging his mug with a grin. Mila reached over and shut her curtains to stop that other buffoon from feeding Gentle flashcards through the glass in order to tell Gentle what to say. Mila wanted her panicked children to be genuine, not to fit partial information. Ruli always had this sense of confidence about her that made it nigh impossible for Mila to ever get the girl worked up over anything other than cooking meat or big swords. Deep breaths, tell us what you think is so good about fair play, Aldi said brightly. Gentle swallowed, looking longingly at the closed curtains as if hoping someone might save him.
I honestly can't say much about the company. I haven't worked there for very long, or at all,
Gentle admitted, looking down at the ground as he held his wrist in front of him in an awkward posture. He took another deep breath.
But I know my father. He's not mine by blood, but he raised me, and he rescued many people from dungeons that choked areas with mana, but made their resources horrible in return. I know dungeons aren't our farms or mines, and they are alive, but the damage that they can do is really bad. I've seen villages wiped out from extreme mana poisoning or local monsters going feral, she said, looking at them with serious eyes. Even if you don't accept fair play as a major holder, we help regulate the adventurers, import a lot of materials that you can use as offerings, and also simply keep the monsters down. I don't want to even say it, but dungeons that turn into abominations. I personally experienced with that, and it changed my life. I don't want that to happen to this dungeon, he pleaded, and it was far more moving than his company lingo from before. Which dungeon did you see that happen to? Mila asked. All human gone. Gentle looked down, avoiding her eyes. Moon Meadows,
where the grass glowed silver under the moon, he whispered, and Mila winced. The silver dungeon abomination was infamous. What is an abomination? Alpha asked, and Gentle looked at him with a slight hard look in his eyes. Dungeons that... He paused, then sighed.
Some people hurt dungeons, tamper with the core, or drive it mad. It begins to hurt itself, to break the rules, spawn monsters outside, affect people inside, and more. Sometimes it's because the dungeon fixates on the challenges, or someone tries to befriend a dungeon. A few times, when Fairplay tried to manage a dungeon, did turn hostile, and then the abominations when they refused to work with the company. I won't lie. I know it's happened, but I don't know why things are allowed to reach that point, Gentle admitted, looking for a single moment, doubtful of his beloved company. Mila smelled the weakness, and she paused. That does sound worrying. How can we be sure to let fair play if we can't be assured that they won't ruin the dungeon? We quite like the dungeon, Mila said with a false threat. Grum was staring at her with some form of disgust at her acting. The brat could kiss her. I want to promise that, but I can't. Maybe I could look onto all the records as the potential liaison to this town, find out what the company did wrong, or ask my boss, Gentle quickly corrected himself. There was a pause before Alpha spoke up with more emotion than Mila ever heard of him. Delta is no abomination. Alpha spoke up, and Gentle blinked at his hostility. I know that, but it's more in case she's not an abomination. Miss D is kind and believes in me. Alpha stressed. Eyes flashed. Right. Gentle swallowed hard. Mila quickly stood up and held her hand out. As a potential partner and our liaison to fair play, I, Mila Darkness Bane, would like those records, please, or proper explanation. She beamed. This should keep those corporate pay to win asshats busy for a while. Gentle took the hand with a nervous energy. Argus, Gentle, I think I'm going to mess this up, he whimpered, and Mila gripped his hand harder as if sealing the pact between them. Perfect, she grinned wolfishly. I'm going to call him Gus, Theo proclaimed loud enough for her windows to rattle. Gentle is fine, the boy tried to argue. So Gus, what is it like to know that you're doomed? Grim asked casually, and his orange tongue seemed to fascinate Gentle for a second. It feels pretty bad, Gentle admitted. It's fine, Mila clapped him on the shoulder as she led him to a front door. By the time you're in your late 20s, doom feels pretty normal, and then it's all downhill from there until you hit 50, and you either turn cranky, have a big family of people like Grim, or make cheese in your basement, she said sagely. Gentle whimpered as he looked at all of them, as if seeing his future and not liking it one bit. This was why Mila got up in the mornings, for that exact expression of terrible dread on children's faces. End of chapter.
And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.
I just want to give a quick thanks to the Tier 5 patrons and channel members. Alithia, Barky, Fudic Yol, Cam Maxwell, Caspar Onholtz, White Van 420, Lord Asrakal, Arcadian, and Oakfield.